Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. All the channels we've given you in the last week have been profoundly given in love. In love. We wish you to review all 13. Listen to them with international ears. Not Jewish ears. And not from any other parts of the region, just with international ears. And yet, I am in Israel. And the messages that I've given are for the Jews. It makes sense. And there has been a powerful message, and I want to make it clear once again. Once again. The term the chosen ones refer to the Jews. But when you look at what you're chosen for, it gives you pause for a moment. We'll be very clear so that you understand it. Chosen to bring this planet a monotheistic God, a one God. Not like the Greeks, not like the Romans, but like the Jews. That the one God would then be seen by the planet, and eventually the entire planet would be unified with one God. You were chosen to do that, and you did. But you're not done. And the next part is as hard as the first, because it is planetary as well. Dear ones, listen clearly. You are chosen to bring peace here. You hold all the cards. You have the technology and the wisdom and the akash of purpose. You brought the planet together with the spirituality. Now finish the job. That's what we said. With all love. You're the ones chosen to do it. Oh, you would say. When will they say it's going to be so difficult? It's not just us, it's them. We gave you the parable of the farmer a little while ago. And if you didn't really understand it, it was the farmer's field, and it was the farmer's seeds, and it was the farmer's akash to plant them. And he died without ever seeing them grow up. And that's because the farmer had the wrong consciousness. His sons, born into a new light, into a climate change of energy, saw them come up, started to understand, started to let them grow. They were the seeds of peace. The parable should be clear that sometimes consciousness gets in the way. You've got a story that shows this profoundly, and you may not even know it. We teach that consciousness is energy, and it is physics. It is so palatable, it has rules. Someday, there will be inventions in multidimensional physics that will break open the barrier of understanding. The chances are very high that these physics experiments and discoveries will come from here. And when they do, you will see that consciousness, what human beings think collectively, can be measured. Changes things, moves things. Belief moves things. I want to take you back for a moment into a story that every child knows. It's a story that is known worldwide about this area. And you may not recognize really truly what happened. It is the Exodus from Egypt. You all know it. Moses talked to God. He did it on a regular basis. Moses had his frustrations as well. But he did something unusual. He wandered. He took an entire civilization from Egypt, brought them to the Promised Land after a while. And if you track his path, it doesn't seem logical. For he approaches Jerusalem over and over and turns the other way and goes back. He did something in 40 years that should have taken 4 months. Why? Not only that, why didn't he go? There is something here that you have to know. Let us look at the power and the physics of consciousness. And I'm going to give it to you yet again if you have not heard it. You cannot take a civilization with the consciousness of slaves and put them in the Promised Land. There had to be a turnover, like the farmer. Belief. An entire generation or two had to come and go before you made it. Did you know that? Moses was smart. He knew this. He obeyed God. He knew there would be dissension and arguing, even if he made it, among those who used to be slaves and had been slaves for generations. They had to be born here in a new energy that was not Egypt. That is the reason. Consciousness was important, and he knew it. There's more. Consciousness has been shifting on this planet in anticipation of this new energy. A new dispensation of compassion has begun. And the ones who are going to serve it best will be the Jews, and it's going to be hard. The situation is more than difficult, it's untenable. There is no solution that you can see. But there is. And the young people will be the first ones to tell you. What are you going to do when they start meeting together in an unauthorized way? Who's going to punish who when they stand hand in hand and sing peaceful songs to you? Adult, what are you going to do with your kids when they don't do what they're told regarding the situation? It's only begun. It's going to take time. There is wisdom brewing. and there's precedent for it. What if I told you you're the last ones to make peace? The last ones. And everybody's waiting for you. 70 years ago, the war to end all wars, they say, had come to an end. And the enemies of old were conquered. I would like to show you what consciousness can do. With generations, what can happen? A precedent has been set. Maybe you didn't look at this clearly. What do Americans think about the Japanese? What happened in this war? Unbelievable. The number of lives that were lost, the atrocities on both sides, and then the bomb. First country ever to use nuclear weapons on another civilization. How do the Japanese feel about the Americans? I want to tell you, they're allies. They are so connected right now through trade that they have a collective economy. As goes one, goes the other. That's how close they are right now after 2 generations. You see, there's a precedent of consciousness. At some point in time, everything that happened in the past was wiped away and was not near as important as the future. And they moved forward. Generations had to pass before they were able to be best friends, and they are. And they are. There are many who will revisit the war and take a look at it. Those were old times with old energy. And today they look at each other hand in hand and say, "Aren't you glad it's over? Aren't you glad it's over?" 70 years. How do you feel about the countries that were part of the genocide? How do you feel? This may be inappropriate. I am asking you a practical, spiritual question. And the answer is, the generations of Jews have put it aside. There are people here right now from those countries, hand in hand. The dictator is gone. He enslaved them all, and you. And you rose from the ashes of hatred and sorrow and pain and unspeakable horror. And you stand hand in hand, and they're here. That's what you did. That's what the planet has done. You were there. Oh, there's more. There's a lot more. Maybe you have never put this together. In the last 70 years, it was the ramp up to a new civilization of energy. Things happen slowly. It's not a flashbulb experience when you have a dispensation change. It may take generations to get there, to change and then build. I want to take you to a meeting at the end of World War II. There were those who said, if we don't do this now, Something's going to happen. And this that they were going to do was to try to unify all of the former enemies of Europe. Give them a trade organization. If you can trade with your enemy, they said, you're less likely to go to war. Look who was involved. Look who was involved. All the conquering nations of earth. All of them. The ones with the biggest armies. The ones that have even swept through here. With the biggest navies. That have been at each other for years. Responsible for World War I. And then did it again with the same people in World War II. The committee met and said, if we don't bring this trade now, this can happen again. This was a moment in history where human beings had an idea. Let's put things together instead of separating them and tearing them apart. It was the beginning of what you call today the European Union. It's controversial. There are those who say, well, it'll never last. It may morph, dear ones, into something else as they become wiser. But let me tell you what they did. They disarmed the situation. They started trading together. They started seeing that it was possible. The ones who would tear it apart, the ones who would throw rocks at it, slowly became the minority when they realized it wasn't working anymore. And slowly, very slowly, it started to work. Then the borders came down. You didn't need a passport anymore. You could travel between lands that used to be enemies with tanks. The guardhouses that used to check your papers went away. And they started traveling among themselves. All the former enemies of Europe that had been at war for eons. And then, against all odds, they started to put the economy together and give them the same currency. Dear ones, if you had presented this plan in 1945, they would have laughed at you and said, this is foolish, impossible, silliness. You see, you don't know the situation. And then the United Nations came up with their charter. And you came back. I've just given you the fact that the civilization of this planet is starting to morph and change. There is great hope all around you. All around you. Precedent means that it has happened. When it never happened before, you can look at it and you can see you're not alone. Is it possible to change attitudes? And the answer is yes. And you do it with consciousness. Kryon, it's just too simple. You sit there in the chair, and as an American man channeling, you don't know the situation. Is it all right to be frank? Is it all right to be practical and to say these things to you now? Have you tried love? And the answer is, you are so naive. Things are not going to change just because you sing songs and have some love. You are right. What happens is when you start having compassion for those you never had compassion for before, to understand their situation and see what it is that would change them in order to change you. What is most important and who benefits? I am not going to give you a solution sitting in this chair. You are going to discover it. And it's going to be different than you think. One thing leads to another. Unless you're the farmer in the field and you grow up with the situation, and in your heart you know it's hopeless, and in your heart you think nothing can happen, and in your heart you think this is foolishness. If that's you, dear farmer, you won't see it. Consciousness is belief. If you believe these things have a chance, even though you don't know how, you start to plant the seeds of hope. I'm talking to Jews. Again, I say, you're the ones chosen to put it together. A great deal of the world is looking at you now. How are they going to do it? There will be no solution from an outside source. I have said that before. Oh, they'll try, but they don't understand. They weren't born here. You were. You're going to work with others who were born here. And a solution eventually will be thought of and tried. Perhaps even cast away and tried again. It will come from compassion and love instead of retribution and hate. And the thing that's going to make the difference is when you start to see that it works. War begets war, you know that. There is no winner ever. This is what you're doing. You'll leave this place and you'll wonder what all this means. There is a shift coming. There are what we will call wild cards that can be here in the form of ideas and people from both sides of the wall who want what you want. For their children, they want what you want. For their futures, they want what you want. And there will be a way. When you leave this place, there will be a tendency to go and turn on the news. And when you do, don't be flattened. Don't let your heart sink to a low ebb yet again. Understand it's the beginning of the end of the situation. It's going to have to play out this way because of consciousness. Consciousness change is slow. Will you let the seeds grow? Will you water them with your hope and your love? Despite what you see, despite what is happening, despite the others who don't want to do this way. They want war. They want retribution, frustration, compassion. I want you to look at the masters that walked this land and start emulating them. Compassion is the key. And it all came from here. It's in your blood. That's what you're chosen for. The hardest thing the planet will ever see. Peace in the region. color is coming. Indeed. God bless you in this land. I'm Kryon, and so it is.